Have you ever wondered how the United States came into existence? Let's journey back to a time long before the United States was even a concept, to the days when the first settlers arrived in North America. These were the indigenous tribes, diverse and rich in culture, who had been calling this land home for thousands of years. They traveled from Asia across the land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska, spreading out over the vast expanse of the continent, forming civilizations as varied as the landscape itself. Now, fast forward to the late 15th century, a new set of explorers were setting their sights on this land. Europeans, driven by the promise of wealth and new beginnings, began to venture across the Atlantic. Among them, the British were particularly drawn to North America. But the story of the United States truly begins in the early 17th century. A group of English pilgrims, seeking religious freedom, embarked on a perilous journey aboard a ship known as the Mayflower. In November of 1620, they established the first permanent English colony in North America, Plymouth Colony, in what is now Massachusetts. Despite harsh conditions and a difficult first winter, the colony survived, thanks to the assistance of friendly indigenous tribes. This marked the beginning of a wave of British colonization, with other colonies soon springing up along the eastern seaboard. These colonies, each with its own unique identity and purpose, were the seeds that would eventually grow into the 13 original states of a new nation. Yet, the relationship between the settlers and the indigenous people was far from harmonious. Conflict and displacement marred the history of these early years, a stark reminder of the price paid by the indigenous people during the formation of this new nation. Thus began the tale of a land that would eventually become the United States. As we peel back the layers of history, we'll see how this nation, born out of a quest for freedom and opportunity, grew and transformed, shaped by the people who called it home and the events that unfolded on its soil. What drives a group of colonies to rise against their mother country and fight for independence? This is a question that echoes through the annals of history, and the answer takes us to the heart of the American story. Picture this. It's the mid-18th century, and the 13 colonies are simmering with discontent. They're like teenagers, yearning for autonomy and chafing under the watchful eye of their British parents. Their grievances pile up like kindling: the denial of the right to self-govern, the restriction of trade, and the imposition of taxes without their consent. This last one, famously summed up in the rallying cry of "no taxation without representation," became a spark that ignited the flame of revolution. As tensions escalated, a series of events unfolded that pushed the colonies closer to rebellion. The Boston Massacre in 1770, where British soldiers killed 5 colonists, fanned the flames of resentment. The Boston Tea Party in 1773, a defiant act of protest against the Tea Act, further stoked the fires of revolution. By the spring of 1775, the situation reached a boiling point, with the battles of Lexington and Concord, marking the start of the American Revolutionary War. The colonies were no longer simply rebelling, they were fighting for their freedom. A year later, on July 4, 1776, 56 representatives from the 13 colonies gathered in Philadelphia. Under the watchful gaze of the Liberty Bell, they signed the Declaration of Independence. This remarkable document, penned by Thomas Jefferson, proclaimed their separation from Britain and asserted their unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This pivotal moment, the birth of a new nation, was a daring leap into the unknown. It was a testament to the resilience, courage, and unwavering belief in the ideals of liberty and self-governance that defined the American spirit. With the ringing of the Liberty Bell, a new nation was born. The road to independence was fraught with challenges, but it was a journey that shaped the United States as we know it today. What does it take to build a nation from scratch? Imagine being tasked with the monumental job of designing a brand new government. This was the challenge that confronted the founding fathers of the United States. In the wake of independence, the new nation faced the daunting task of creating a novel government that would hold the diverse states together, while preserving individual liberties and avoiding the tyranny they had escaped from. The solution was a bold experiment in governance, a federal system where power would be shared between a central government and individual states. The linchpin of this new system was the United States Constitution, a remarkable document that drafted in 1787 and ratified a year later. The Constitution established a government with 3 separate branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, each with its own powers and responsibilities. This was a groundbreaking move, a deliberate design to ensure no single entity held too much power, embodying the principle of checks and balances. But the Constitution was not perfect. It was subject to intense debates and disagreements. Many feared it granted too much power to the central government and lacked explicit protection for individual rights. This led to the creation of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, in 1791. These amendments safeguarded crucial individual liberties like freedom of speech, religion, and the right to a fair trial, forming the bedrock of American democracy. The establishment of the federal system, the drafting of the Constitution, and the creation of the Bill of Rights were monumental tasks that required vision, compromise, and an unwavering belief in the ideals of liberty and democracy. It was a journey filled with challenges, debates, and disagreements, but it was also one that shaped a new nation. This was the birth of the United States of America as we know it today, a nation built on the principles of federalism, checks and balances, and individual rights. A bold experiment that continues to evolve and adapt, shaping the course of history. What happens when a young nation starts to grow? This is the question that the United States grappled with in its early years. The answer? Expansion, conflict, and the struggle to define its destiny. The Louisiana Purchase in the early 19th century effectively doubled the size of the young nation. Picture this. For a mere $15 million, President Thomas Jefferson managed to acquire a vast expanse of territory stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. A grand bargain, wasn't it? But this grand acquisition also sparked a grand debate: how to govern this new territory. In the pursuit of a larger American footprint, the concept of manifest destiny was born. This idea, deeply ingrained in the American psyche, held that the United States was destined, by God, some claimed, to expand its dominion and spread its influence across the continent. It was seen as an inevitable, natural, even divine progression. But this divine progression was not without its earthly conflicts. One of these was the Mexican-American War. Ostensibly fought over a border dispute in Texas, the war resulted in the United States gaining vast territories in the West. These new lands, however, sparked a fierce debate over the expansion of slavery, a contentious issue that would fan the flames leading to the Civil War. Which brings us to the elephant in the room: slavery. As the nation expanded, the question of whether new states would be free or slaveholding became increasingly divisive. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to maintain a delicate balance, but it only delayed the inevitable. The Dred Scott decision, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the violent confrontations in Bleeding Kansas, all were precursors to the brutal conflict that would redefine the nation. The nation was expanding, but not without its share of conflicts and contradictions. As we'll see in the next segment, these conflicts would come to a head in a devastating civil war, a conflict that would forever change the United States. But that, my friends, is a tale for another scene. How does a nation heal after being torn apart by a civil war? This question gripped the United States in the mid-19th century, a period of intense conflict and transformation. The Civil War, a violent clash between the northern and southern states, was a battle over the nation's moral compass. At the heart of this conflict was the issue of slavery, a brutal institution that the Southern economy heavily relied on. It was a war that tested the very fabric of American society and its ideals. In 1863, as the war raged on, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This historic document declared that all enslaved individuals in Confederate-held territory were to be set free. It was a daring move that shifted the war's focus towards a fight for human freedom. However, the path to freedom was far from smooth. Tragedy struck in 1865 when Lincoln, the champion of emancipation, was assassinated. His death sent shockwaves through a nation still grappling with the aftermath of a devastating war. Following Lincoln's death, the United States entered a period known as Reconstruction. This era aimed to rebuild the southern states and integrate freed slaves into society. It was a time of profound change, marked by both progress and resistance. The Reconstruction era brought significant constitutional amendments, including the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th, which granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including former slaves, and the 15th, which guaranteed the right to vote regardless of race or previous condition of servitude. These amendments marked a significant step forward in the fight for equality. However, the period also witnessed fierce opposition from those resistant to change, leading to the rise of discriminatory laws and practices that sought to undermine these newfound freedoms. The Civil War and Reconstruction were periods of immense upheaval, but they were also times of extraordinary transformation. They challenged and changed the nation's understanding of freedom, equality, and democracy. It was a time of great upheaval, but also a time of significant change. How does a nation evolve through industrialization and global conflicts? This question takes us to the late 19th century, the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. The country, rich in natural resources and driven by the spirit of innovation, embraced this era of rapid industrial growth. Factories sprouted like mushrooms, churning out goods on a scale never seen before. Railroads crisscrossed the nation, opening up new markets and knitting together the vast American landscape. This industrial boom also triggered a massive wave of immigration. Eager for opportunity, millions from Europe and Asia poured into the United States, forever changing the nation's cultural fabric. These immigrants, though often faced with hardship and discrimination, played a crucial role in building the nation's industrial backbone. The world stage, however, was not to be outdone by the domestic scene. The early 20th century was marked by two global conflicts, World War I and World War II. The United States played a pivotal role in both wars, initially choosing a stance of neutrality, but eventually joining the Allies. The wars were not merely overseas battles for the U.S., they were catalysts for profound economic and social changes at home. The nation's factories, once producing consumer goods, were now turned into arsenals of democracy, manufacturing weapons and supplies for the military. World War II, in particular, brought about remarkable social changes. Women, for the first time in large numbers, stepped into roles traditionally held by men, working in factories and offices, while the men were away at war. This shift challenged the existing social norms and laid the groundwork for the women's rights movement. The aftermath of the wars saw the United States standing tall on the world stage. The nation had transformed from a burgeoning industrial power to a global superpower, wielding considerable military, political, and economic clout. The Industrial Revolution and the World Wars, with their trials and tribulations, had indeed shaped the United States. Through these events, the United States emerged as a global superpower. What defines the United States in the modern era? One could argue that it is a blend of innovation, conflict, and social change. Let's dive in. The Cold War era was an intense period of political and military tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, which lasted from 1947 to 1991. This era was marked by a nuclear arms race, ideological battles, and proxy wars, one of which was the Vietnam War, a contentious and divisive conflict that deeply impacted American society. The civil rights movement was another defining feature of the modern United States. From the mid-1950s to the late 1960s, activists and ordinary citizens alike fought against racial discrimination and for equal rights for all Americans, regardless of race. This movement led to significant legislative changes, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, forever altering the landscape of American society. Parallel to these events was the space race, a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union to achieve superior spaceflight capability. It was during this period that the United States achieved one of its most iconic moments, the landing of the Apollo 11 mission on the moon in 1969. Fast forward to the turn of the century, and we find ourselves in the midst of a technological revolution. The advent and proliferation of the internet, smartphones, and other digital technologies have transformed every aspect of American life, from how we work to how we communicate to how we consume information and entertainment. In recent years, the United States has grappled with a range of challenges, from economic crises and political polarization to the ongoing struggle for social justice and the global COVID-19 pandemic. These events continue to shape the nation and its people. The United States continues to evolve, shaping and being shaped by the events of the world. The story of the United States is one of constant change and adaptation, a testament to the resilience of its people. As we look to the future, we can only anticipate what the next chapter of this ever-evolving narrative holds. So, what can we learn from the history of the United States? From its birth as a nation, the United States has been a testament to resilience and adaptability. The road to independence was fraught with struggle, but in the end, a new government was formed, one that would be continuously tested and refined. Throughout expansion and conflict, the Civil War and Reconstruction, the nation emerged stronger, its identity more defined. The leaps and bounds made during the Industrial Revolution propelled the United States onto the global stage, setting the scene for its involvement in 2 world wars. And in the modern era, the United States continues to grapple with its past while forging ahead, ever evolving. The thread running through it all is an undeniable resilience, a capacity to learn, adapt, and grow. The United States is a living testament to the power of perseverance. As we look back at the past, we gain insight into the future. The story of the United States is still being written, and we are all a part of it.